She walked into a luxury hotel looking like the world was hers, a top OnlyFans star, a glamorous icon loved by millions. But less than 24 hours later, Iris Hsieh was found lifeless in a bathtub, her body cold, her story shattered, and the truth buried under lies, drugs, and contradictions. What really happened inside that hotel room? Who was she with? And why are investigators now calling it murder? This is the haunting final chapter of a woman who had everything, except safety. Iris Hsieh lived a life that millions admired but very few understood. To the world, she was a glowing symbol of confidence, beauty, and success, a woman who had climbed her way to the very top of Taiwan's online entertainment world. When people saw her photos or watched her videos, they didn't just see a creator, they saw a fantasy. Everything about her appeared perfect: the flawless makeup, the luxury hotels, the designer clothes, the elegant softness in her voice, and the effortless way she posed as if the camera belonged to her. She became a dream many wished they could touch, and yet behind all that perfection, behind the soft lighting and filters, was a human being slowly worn down by the silent pressure of fame. Before the fame, before the headlines, before she became a global topic, Iris was simply a hardworking nurse. A young woman waking up before the sun, walking hospital hallways with tired eyes, comforting patients, dealing with emergencies, earning a modest salary that never matched the emotional toll of her job. She was admired by her coworkers for her commitment, but deep inside, she wanted something more, something beyond the walls of a hospital. She wanted independence, financial stability, and a life where she didn't have to constantly worry about bills, shifts, and burnout. And so, when she discovered a world where her beauty, personality, and charisma could change her future, she stepped through the door without looking back. Her rise was fast, unnaturally fast. Within months, Iris was ranking among the top creators on OnlyFans. People around the world subscribed to her content, mesmerized by her blend of elegance and seduction. She wasn't just another influencer, she was a brand, a persona, a mystery wrapped in glamour. Fame wrapped around her like a spotlight, and she embraced it with confidence. She traveled, upgraded her lifestyle, surrounded herself with opportunities she once thought belonged only to celebrities. She felt powerful, and for a while, she truly was. But fame is a double-edged sword. For every supporter she gained, she attracted an equal number of people with darker intentions, people who wanted to control her, use her, own her, or drag her into lifestyles she was never fully prepared to face. Online harassment, unwanted attention, obsessive fans, and dangerous invitations became part of her daily life. Iris learned to smile through it all, to appear strong even when she was exhausted inside. She spent nights alone in hotel rooms, scrolling through messages that alternated between praise and threats. She was adored by thousands, yet she often felt completely alone. Many of her friends later shared that Iris was emotionally fragile in ways she kept carefully hidden. She didn't talk much about her loneliness, but it reflected in her quiet moments, the pauses between her sentences, the way her smile sometimes faded when the camera stopped recording. She longed for genuine companionship, for a real connection untainted by fame or expectation. Most people approached her because of what she represented, not for who she truly was. Every time she let someone into her life, she wondered whether they cared about her heart, or her status. And as her popularity grew, so did the risks around her. She met people in nightlife circles, entertainment circles, high society circles, people with money, influence, and sometimes addictive habits. Some treated her with respect, others used her fame as a way to elevate themselves. She stood in rooms filled with alcohol, drugs, temptations, and people who lived fast, reckless lifestyles. Iris tried to remain in control, to protect her image, but the pressure of maintaining perfection while navigating dangerous environments was slowly crushing her. Behind the flawless photo shoots was a woman who barely slept. Behind the confident posts was someone battling insecurity. Behind the glamorous life was someone who never knew who to fully trust. And the more she earned, the more she traveled, the more she connected with powerful men, the more vulnerable she became to manipulation, exploitation, and harm. In her final months, Iris started seeking more privacy. She traveled quietly, kept her plans secret, and limited how much she shared with the public. She didn't know who was watching her, who was following her, or who might be waiting for the perfect opportunity to take advantage of her. But even in her caution, she still wanted companionship, someone who could understand the weight she carried. That desire became her greatest vulnerability. And that vulnerability followed her all the way to Kuala Lumpur. When she stepped into the hotel on Jalan Conley, she wasn't the glamorous influencer her fans saw online. She was just a 31-year-old woman looking for a moment of peace, a night of company, or maybe a break from the relentless stress of her life. But the path she took, the people she trusted, would lead her into a situation far more dangerous than she could ever have imagined. She had no idea that this trip, this hotel, this night, would be the last chapter of her life. She had no idea that behind the walls of that luxurious room, she was walking directly into a storm she would never survive. And the double life she lived, the fame she embraced and the pain she hid, would soon collide in the worst way possible. The final day of Iris Hsieh's life began like any other trip she had taken before, quietly, privately, and away from the eyes of her millions of followers. She had arrived in Kuala Lumpur for what seemed like a short getaway, a break from her exhausting cycle of work, travel, and online pressure. No one knew her exact plans. Iris had started keeping her movements hidden, sharing less, posting less, trusting fewer people. She checked into the hotel under that same veil of privacy, blending into the lobby like any other traveler, unaware that every step she took that evening would become part of a police investigation. The hotel on Jalan Conley was elegant, modern, and quiet, the kind of place where people went to disappear for a night, to escape the world, or to indulge in things they didn't want recorded. Security cameras captured her walking through the entrance, calm, composed, carrying herself with confidence. She looked tired, but not distressed. Many later believed she had no idea she was walking into danger. Her check-in was smooth, and from the outside, nothing appeared unusual. But behind the scenes, the final 24 hours of Iris's life were already unfolding with a frightening pace. Not long after she settled into her room, she met with the man who would become the center of the entire case, Malaysian rapper Namewee. They had known each other casually, but the details of their relationship remain blurry. Some say they were friends. Some say they were collaborators. Others believe he was someone she trusted enough to spend the night with. Whatever the truth was, he was the last known person to see her alive. He arrived at the hotel that evening, and from that moment on, everything that happened behind the closed door of room remained shrouded in mystery. Hours passed with no public record of what went on inside that room. No phone calls, no social media posts, no messages. Just silence. A silence that would grow more disturbing as investigators later examined the timeline. The only confirmed facts came from Namewee's own statements. He claimed the two spent the evening talking, relaxing, and at one point, Iris supposedly went to take a shower. He said she had been in the bathroom for almost 30 minutes before he noticed something was wrong. But even this timeline has been questioned, because so much of what happened that night contradicts the scene police eventually found. What we do know is that Iris never walked back out of that bathroom alive. At some point during those quiet hours, something happened, something that turned an ordinary hotel stay into a crime scene. Something that left her unconscious, with no signs of struggle in the room, no water splashed on the floor, and no clear explanation for how she ended up in a bathtub that had no water in it. The hotel staff had no idea anything was wrong until the morning. They saw nothing suspicious. They heard no noise. There was no cry for help, no alarm, no commotion, nothing that signaled a life or death emergency happening just a few floors above. Iris remained alone in that silent bathroom until daylight, when Namewee finally contacted the authorities claiming he had found her unresponsive. By then, it was too late. Her body had already begun to cool. Her phone, once constantly active, was silent. Her online persona, so full of life and brightness, had vanished in the middle of a hidden, quiet night. And all that was left was a disturbing timeline filled with unanswered questions and a small window of hours that investigators believe hold the truth of what really happened. The last 24 hours of Iris's life were not chaotic. They were not dramatic. They were painfully, hauntingly ordinary, and that is what makes them so frightening. Because somewhere within that calm, quiet evening, her fate was sealed. When the hotel staff finally opened the door to Iris's room, the world outside was just waking up. Cars moved along Jalan calmly, guests checked out, breakfast was being served downstairs, everything normal, everything alive. But inside that room, time had already stopped. The air felt heavy, thick, and unnaturally still, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Nothing was out of place at first glance. The bed was untouched. The lights were dimmed. The room looked like someone had simply stepped out for a moment. But then, the staff pushed open the bathroom door. And the scene they found would change everything. Iris Hsieh was lying in the bathtub, motionless, colorless, and disturbingly peaceful in a way that didn't match the horror of what had happened to her. Her long hair clung to her shoulders, her skin looked drained of life, and her body was positioned in a way that didn't resemble a fall, an accident, or someone slipping while showering. She looked placed, almost arranged, as if someone wanted the scene to look calm, to look harmless, to look like anything except foul play. What shocked investigators even more was the one detail that made no sense: there was no water in the tub. No splashes. No puddles. No moisture on the floor. Just a dry bathtub, and a dead woman who was supposedly taking a bath. Her lips showed signs of cyanosis, a bluish tint that suggested lack of oxygen. Her fingernails had a faint discoloration. Her body temperature was already low. But there were no bruises on her arms, no cuts, no visible signs of struggle. It was as if whatever happened to her took place silently, without resistance, without warning. This immediately raised the alarms. How does a healthy, conscious 31-year-old simply collapse into a dry bathtub without even attempting to stand, shout, or call for help? The bathroom itself was too clean. Too organized. Too untouched. Nothing was knocked over. The shampoo bottles were perfectly aligned. The towels were folded. The sink countertop held only a few small items. There was no chaos, no panic, no sign of a fight or accidental injury. It was the kind of scene investigators dread, the kind that looks innocent at first, but becomes more disturbing the longer you stare at it. The paramedics who arrived later described Iris's body as already stiffening, indicating she had been dead for hours before anyone called for help. But that raised an even bigger question: why did the man who was with her wait so long? Why didn't he call immediately? Why was there a gap of hours between her last known movement and the emergency call? As officers walked through the bathroom, they noticed small details that didn't match the story given to them. Items slightly out of place. A faint odor associated with certain substances. Inconsistent marks on her skin that couldn't be explained by falling asleep. The dry bathtub kept pulling their attention, because it suggested one terrifying possibility: Iris may not have gone into that tub on her own. Her body positioning wasn't natural. Her head was tilted in a direction inconsistent with a sudden collapse. Her arm hung over the side in a way that looked carefully set rather than the result of gravity. Everything pointed toward the idea that Iris had been moved, that someone had tried to stage the scene, or at least soften the appearance of what happened that night. The quiet room, the calm bathroom, the untouched bathtub, they all concealed a truth far darker than what they appeared to show. And the peaceful appearance of Iris's body only made the scene more chilling, because it suggested one thing: whatever ended her life did not come from a violent struggle. It came silently, swiftly, and very possibly from someone she trusted. And as investigators stood inside that bathroom, looking at Iris's lifeless body, one realization became clear: this was not an accident. This was not a medical emergency. This was the beginning of a mystery that would unravel the final hours of a woman who should have walked out of that room alive. From the moment investigators stepped into that hotel room, one question echoed louder than all the others: who was the last person to see Iris alive? And the answer pointed directly to one man, a well-known Malaysian rapper and internet personality, named Wee. A celebrity in his own right, someone with millions of followers, someone Iris seemed to trust enough to spend the night with. But the closer investigators looked at his statements, his actions, and his behavior, the more the entire situation began to shift from confusion to suspicion. Namely claimed he and Iris had met up peacefully. He said they had spent the evening talking, relaxing, and that she suddenly went to take a bath and never came out. But the moment police heard that explanation, it clashed immediately with the scene in front of them. A dry bathtub. A motionless body. A timeline that didn't make sense. And a man who appeared strangely composed for someone who had just discovered a woman dead beside him. But what raised even more doubts was his behavior before and after the discovery. According to the hotel logs, there was no panic. No screaming. No rushing through hallways for help. He stayed inside that room for an extended period before contacting anyone. Hours passed. Hours in which Iris lay inside a dry bathtub, her body cooling while the one man who claimed he found her did nothing to save her. The medical team later confirmed that calling even a little earlier might have changed her chances, but he hadn't. When questioned, his demeanor was calm. Too calm. He explained Iris had simply collapsed. That she had joked about feeling tired. That she had gone into the bathroom willingly. But investigators immediately noticed inconsistencies in his story. Every time they pressed him on the timeline, the details shifted slightly. The length of time she spent inside the bathroom changed. The moment he realized something was wrong changed. Even the description of her condition when he allegedly found her sounded rehearsed, as if he were trying to shape the narrative before facts could prove otherwise. Then came the drug tests. The moment his screening returned positive for controlled substances, everything changed. Not because drug use alone proved guilt, but because it opened an entirely new layer of possibilities. Did Iris also take something that night? Was she given something without her knowledge? Was there a mixture that affected her heart or breathing? Did something that happened between them cause her collapse? Investigators kept these questions quiet, but the direction of the case shifted sharply. Adding to the tension were the items found in the room, traces of a party-like environment, the kind of setup often associated with intoxication or unsafe behavior. Yet none of it aligned with the calm, clean bathroom scene. It felt like two different stories were fighting for control, one told by the evidence, and one told by Namewee. What also unsettled authorities was how quickly he distanced himself from the situation once the police arrived. He made statements that implied Iris had been acting strange, had been tired, had perhaps overdosed, creating a subtle attempt to shift suspicion away from himself. But investigators couldn't ignore the fact that he was the only person with her in those crucial moments. No one else entered. No one else left. The timeline belonged entirely to him. Online, the case exploded instantly. Fans were shocked. Malaysian media swarmed every detail. Some defended him. Some accused him. But through all the noise, one truth remained unchangeable: he was the last person with Iris when she was alive, and the first person to see her dead. As detectives reviewed CCTV footage, they noticed more small inconsistencies. His body language leaving the hotel. His interactions with staff. The unusual delay in his emergency call. None of it pointed to a man in panic. All of it pointed to someone trying to manage a situation, not escape one, but certainly shape it. And while he insisted he had nothing to hide, investigators knew better than to take celebrity statements at face value. Because too often, behind fame and influence, there are shadows. And in this case, every shadow seemed to lead straight back to him. He claimed he didn't know what happened. He claimed it was an accident. He claimed she simply collapsed. But the evidence, the timeline, the drug tests, the staged appearance of the scene, none of it matched the calm story he told. And slowly, the man who walked into that room as a friend, walked out as the primary suspect. Because the truth was simple, Iris didn't walk into that room alone. She didn't die alone. And the only person who knew what happened in those final moments was the same person now insisting he had nothing to do with it. When the investigators began combing through Iris's hotel room, they quickly realized that the scene didn't tell the whole story. On the surface, everything appeared orderly, almost peaceful, yet scattered clues hinted at a far more complicated and sinister reality. The first red flag was the 9 blue pills discovered in the room, later suspected to be ecstasy. Pills like these are powerful, unpredictable, and dangerous, especially when combined with alcohol or other substances. How they came to be in the room, and who had access to them, became central to the investigation. Even more troubling was the dry bathtub. How could someone who supposedly died in a bath leave behind no water, no splashes, no signs of struggle? Investigators noted that this small detail alone contradicted the narrative that Iris had simply collapsed while bathing. Every forensic expert they consulted flagged it immediately. Something didn't add up. The scene suggested that someone had either moved her body, or attempted to stage the environment to conceal the true circumstances of her death. Then came the drug tests. Nam Wee, the last known person with Iris, tested positive for several substances, including amphetamines, methamphetamine, ketamine, and THC. While the presence of drugs alone does not prove guilt, it raised serious questions. Was Iris influenced by substances that night? Did someone administer something to her without her knowledge? Or did the combination of alcohol, drugs, and the late-night setting lead to a fatal accident? The answers were unclear, and the inconsistencies only deepened. Investigators also found contradicting statements from Nam Wee. His timeline kept shifting under questioning. First, he claimed she went into the bathroom for 30 minutes. Then he changed the duration slightly. His description of the moment he discovered her alive, and how he reacted, did not align with the evidence found at the scene. Even small details, like the placement of items in the room and the condition of the bed, were at odds with his story. Every inconsistency amplified suspicion and painted a picture of someone attempting to shape the narrative before investigators could verify the facts. The combination of drugs, a staged scene, and conflicting accounts created a chilling reality. The room seemed quiet, calm, and controlled, almost too perfect. But beneath that veneer lay the chaotic truth of a young woman's final hours. Investigators understood that someone had been in control of the environment after her death, and that the apparent peace of the scene was likely deliberate. The contradictions hinted at something far darker: deception, concealment, and possibly a calculated act that led to her death. What made the situation even more terrifying was the silence surrounding it. No witnesses, no alarms, no hotel staff reported unusual activity, and yet the room contained undeniable evidence of danger, substances that could incapacitate, a body out of place, and explanations that didn't match reality. The combination of these factors signaled a crime carefully hidden in plain sight, and every day the investigation progressed, the closer authorities came to realizing that Iris's death was no accident, it was murder. And as the forensic teams continued to document the room, photograph the pills, and analyze the inconsistencies, one fact became painfully clear: the drugs, the contradictions, and the missing evidence were all threads leading back to a single, haunting question: who was responsible for taking Iris Hsieh's life that night? Even after the hotel room was sealed, the evidence collected, and the initial statements recorded, the case of Iris Hsieh remained shrouded in mystery. Investigators faced an unsettling reality: everything about her death was a puzzle, and some pieces seemed deliberately obscured. The drugs found in the room, the dry bathtub, the conflicting statements, the delayed emergency call, all pointed toward one terrifying conclusion: Iris's death was not an accident. Yet without the final autopsy and toxicology reports, authorities could not definitively prove how, or by whom, she had died. Public attention exploded as news of her death spread. Fans mourned, journalists speculated, and social media erupted with theories, accusations, and outrage. The world wanted answers, demanded justice, and refused to let the story fade. Every detail was scrutinized, every photo, every video, every post she had made before her final hours was dissected. And through it all, one question remained at the center: what really happened inside that hotel room? Nam Wee, the man last seen with her, became a focal point of suspicion. His statements were re-examined, his movements retraced, and his positive drug tests added fuel to the fire. But police cautioned against jumping to conclusions. For now, there was no definitive proof tying him to the act itself. The investigation had to follow the facts, the evidence, and the science. And yet, the inconsistencies in his account, combined with the peculiar conditions of the scene, left authorities certain of one thing: someone's story didn't match reality. As forensic teams waited for the toxicology reports, the room's secrets loomed large. Investigators pondered whether Iris had been intentionally incapacitated, whether substances had been used to manipulate her, or whether someone had acted to hide the truth behind a carefully staged scene. Every possibility felt darker than the last, each more horrifying than imagining her death as a simple accident. And in the midst of all this, the question of motive lingered: who had the opportunity, the access, and the intent to end her life in such a silent, chilling way? The legal proceedings were just beginning. Malaysian authorities reminded the public that the investigation was ongoing, that charges would be filed only when evidence supported them, and that justice had to follow the law. But in the minds of many, the case already carried a sense of grim inevitability. Someone had taken Iris's life, and the search for accountability was only a matter of time. Headlines continued to pile up, the public demanded answers, and every new report added another layer of complexity to an already baffling puzzle. And yet, amid the chaos, one truth stood out: Iris Hsieh's death had left an indelible mark on the world. She was no longer just a social media star, a nurse, or an OnlyFans creator. She had become a symbol, a reminder of the fragility of life, the dangers that can lurk behind fame, and the shadows that can exist even in glamorous, seemingly perfect lives. The battle for truth continues, and every step forward uncovers more questions than answers. But one thing is certain: her story will not be forgotten, and those responsible will face the relentless pursuit of justice. In the end, Iris's life, her struggles, her fame, and her untimely death serve as a haunting warning that even behind the brightest lights, the darkest dangers can hide. And until the investigation is complete, the world watches, waits, and demands that the truth, no matter how shocking, finally comes to light.